you best and we'll send them back better. It was basically supposed to be for the leadership of your youth group, not everybody. Of course, a lot of the churches took everyone, but they really wanted to focus on the leaders. And we had they divided you up into schools, what they called them by ages. But there was a purple school, and those were youth who had surrendered to the ministry in some way. And I helped them or worked with them one week, and we did this a lot. We would go into the auditorium, and one day we did it outside. We prayed up and down the steps going into the auditorium, and then the next day, I think it was, we went inside, and then we went just divided up and took a whole row of chairs and just went and prayed for whoever was going to be sitting in that chair. And it was a really, a really neat experience. And so when I got to one chair, I remember specifically it was like, oh, I need to pray especially for somebody, because I feel like whoever's going to be here is going to be called into the ministry. And I mentioned that to one of the other adults, and he said, this is just from me. He said, but don't try to see who's sitting there. Just let it go. Let God take care of it. And so I did. I have no idea who it was, but I just felt like, it was like that. When I got to that chair, it's like, oh, I haven't prayed for that for anyone. Maybe I should do that right now. So anyway, I would like for us to do some different kinds of things like this on Wednesday nights. So what was the favorite thing you read about God this week, or what you learned about God's character this week?
He keeps his promise.
He keeps his promises. That's right. Even when sometimes it's difficult, and maybe sometimes it doesn't look like he's going to be doing, he's keeping his promise. He is. I mean, he may, just because we don't see it at times, he is still faithful to himself, right?
He's more faithful than his people.
Oh, definitely more faithful than his people. More faithful than us, any of us.
One thing I
Yep.
noticed during our Bible studies was that man consistently sinned.
Yes.
I mean, it didn't really matter who it was. They were either lying or deceiving, or there was just things that was coming up that they did not handle correctly.
Yep.
And in the end, they had to pay for that.
Yes.
God always made sure that he called us on the carpet.
Yep.
They had to pay.
And God still blessed remain faithful to his promise to Abraham, but blessed the nation as a whole, even though the leaders weren't very good, weren't very good leaders.
That expressed his love, didn't it?
Yes, he did.
That's what I learned about God this time, was
Yeah.
that he loves us, he pursues after us, and he desires for us to serve him, and he's willing to take the extra mile
Yep.
to show that to us. Yes.
Do you have something?
What stood out to me was God had the Abraham and Isaac and some of those, they sent for wives out of their own family. And yet here's Joseph in Egypt, and he takes an Egyptian
Yes.
as his wife, and Ephraim and Manasseh comes out of that.
Right. Not only that, and I thought of this week too. As far as we know, none of his children went back to get, wives. They all had basically Canaanite wives. Every single one of them. Because that's the only ones that were around there, right? And yet, Abraham sent to get, say the right one here, Rebekah for Isaac from Ur, the Chaldeans, and then sent Jacob, basically left to go get a wife there, but the rest of them married,
I thought they were that they were picking out of their own tribes and keeping the line pure.
Yeah. Oh, it could be.
But
But
then here's Joseph
yeah.
marrying, and then there are others I did notice some others that took Canaanite wives.
Yep.
In fact, when they went down out of Canaan into Egypt, it talks about their carrying their wives and their children, and they named the wife, and she is Canaanite.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that kind of stuck out to me, that here, you would think that they were trying to keep their line pure, but once you got past Jacob, then it was like, And yet, when they go back, then they're like, they don't have anything to do. Of course, God told them not to intermarry and stuff, but they basically kind of had this idea that we're better than you anyway, which is not right. And they were supposed to, through them, bless all nations, right? Yeah. Anything else? Okay, what can you tell me about Judah's two sons, oldest sons? Onan and I think were the right names, if I mean, that's one I'm just going by memory there, but I think that's right. What happened to them? Well, first to
They both died.
They both died.
And I've forgotten now why.
Well, it just says that he was wicked. Don't know exactly what he did, but he was wicked. So God struck him dead. And then Onan was supposed to take Er's wife and become his wife, which he did, but he was supposed to have kids through her that would then be his brother's kids, his dead brother's kids. And he didn't want to do that. And so he kept from getting her pregnant, and God struck him dead. And then what happened? Her name was Tamar, by the way.
She tricked Judah.
She tricked Judah.
To have children by him.
By him, yes. She don't know exactly what she did, but she sat on the road and acted like a temple prostitute, which was very common back in those days. And Judah went in with her, and then she became pregnant. Judah was mad, going to tell her. In fact, said, "Bring her out here and let's burn her to death." And she said, "Okay, here's those little things of the person that got me pregnant." And Judah realized that was him. Yeah. And he did not give her to his third son, because I think he was just afraid his third son would be killed just like the other two. And but not the oldest of the boys that she had, but the second one was named Perez. And what do we know about him? That was with Judah with his daughter-in-law wife, right? Remember anything about Perez?
I remember the name.
Yeah. He's mentioned in the lineage going down to Jesus, because it's through the tribe of Judah, and it happened to be through his son Perez that eventually led to Jesus. That was the thing. Even like you were saying, even the wicked things that people did, God still used it to fulfill his promises. I always wondered, Jacob basically cheated his brother out of his birthright by, and this to me was more Esau's fault, because Esau came back from being out hunting or whatever, and he's hungry, and he said, "Give me some of that stew." And Jacob said, "Sure, you give me your birthright and I'll give you the stew." And he said, "Okay." It's like he didn't really care about his birthright anyway. But then later, when Rebekah uses him or teaches him, gets him to trick Isaac into blessing him as the firstborn, which he wasn't, I always wondered, because God had already basically said he was going to, Jacob I love, but Esau I hated. He was going to bless Jacob. It was through Jacob that the line would continue. What would have happened? I mean, I think that eventually he would have got the blessing anyway. He would have got the, but instead of having to do all of that finagling and lying and cheating that he did, God would have figured out some way. God would have done it. Don't know what, but he would have done it. Same thing with...
It just shows us what happens when we try to take care of it, and take control of God.
Yes. And there was animosity between the Edomites, the sons of Esau, and the Israelites, even up till getting into the promised land. The Edomites would not let them cross over their land, even though they were close relatives. It's like, nope, you're not going to do that. So,
Well, Perez came into the Messianic line,
yes,
and that went through Boaz and Ruth
right.
and David.
Yep. Yeah. He was, don't know how many, people back there before Boaz and them, but yeah.
It's, in a way, kind of funny. We try to think what God, why he knew what he was going to do before he did it.
Yes.
I mean, it's
Beyond our thinking.
beyond. But as we look at the Scripture, Old and New Testament, we see God choosing the second
Yes.
rather than the first.
Right. Choosing the second rather than the first. He did that a lot.
He chose Jesus, the second Adam,
Yes.
rather than Adam,
Right.
first Adam. And Jacob, and now then Perez.
Yeah.
And we see that quite a bit.
Isaac instead of Ishmael.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of that going on. Ephraim instead of Manasseh. It keeps on going. I was I don't remember where it was, someplace when there was a bunch of ministers. And I don't know if it was all pastors or mostly pastors or whatever, but somebody brought this up and they asked, how many of you are not the oldest son? And it was like 80% of them said, yep, not me. I was second or third or whatever. I was not the oldest. And I always wondered about that. I have an older brother now. And of course now he's been leading music and doing music for many, many years. Part-time and volunteer both, but it's like, God called me to preach, but I don't know why. He did. But there's a lot of that the second son or the third son is the one that God chooses. And I wonder too sometimes if that's because, like me, I was a middle child. So my mom always used to say I was kind of a peacemaker, I was always trying to work things out between my brother and my sister and everything. And maybe that's why. Maybe that prepared me for being at a church and serving at a church, trying to keep peace. So what do you remember about Joseph?
Well, he had a dream that they were going to be bowing down to him. And
Yes.
that was one of the things that I remember.
Yep. That all of his brothers, his mom and dad, both. Yeah. I'm sorry.
He needed to keep his mouth shut at that time.
Yeah.
He kept him out of some trouble.
Yes, it probably would have.
Yes.
But God would have worked it in anyway. I mean,
He was speaking God's word.
He was.
But still, he didn't
And
bow.
when he went to Egypt, he was blessed tremendously.
Right. And then,
After about 13 years,
he was blessed at first, and then he was accused of something he didn't do. Apparently he had been in Potiphar's house for like 10 years working for him. And then Potiphar's wife accuses him of something that he didn't do, but Potiphar didn't try to find out if it was true or not. He just automatically sent him to prison.
Does it say later on that Potiphar knew that his wife was a little bit on the flaky side?
I don't remember him ever mention anything about that after.
I don't know, maybe it was in the movie that I saw.
Yeah.
That might be it.
I do like what she said. Now he got some coat, and we always call it a coat of many colors, but I don't remember what the wording is. But it was some kind of a special cloak anyway. She said she didn't think it was a multicolored cloak, but it definitely wasn't a Technicolor dream coat. If any of you have ever seen that movie or read that musical. But something. And then he was accused of something he didn't do, and so he gets thrown in prison. But even in prison, God was with him, and he rose to the area, the highest prisoner, I guess you could say. And something else happened. What happened next?
He was called to interpret dreams for Pharaoh.
No, before that,
The cupbearer,
the cupbearer and the baker. Yeah, and they did something to offend Pharaoh. We never did find out what it is. And so he threw him in prison. And they were there for quite a while. I don't remember if it says. I want to say 2 years, but I don't remember if that was. No, I know it was 2 years after they got out before they told. But they were in there for a while. And Joseph was sent to take care of them. And they both had dreams. And he interpreted the first one favorably for the cupbearer. And remember, the cupbearer, that's the same job that Nehemiah had. But basically, they would have to taste the food and the drink before serving it to the king. So as long as they tasted it and didn't die, didn't get really sick, then it was safe for the king to eat. So it was a very important position. I guess it depends on whether the king was well liked or not, whether it was a safe position. It might be kind of a dangerous one. But he was restored at the Pharaoh's birthday, and the baker, after the cupbearer got that favorable interpretation of his dream, the baker was like, "Oh, well, great, here's my dream." And yeah, it wasn't so good, right? Basically, in 3 days, Pharaoh's going to chop your head off and impale you, and you're going to be killed. And that's exactly what happened. So one of the things that I think is important about that is the fact that when God was interpreting dreams, or giving the interpretation to Joseph, he wasn't trying to tell people what they wanted to hear. Okay? Yes, the first one was good, and that guy was happy, and it turned out, but the other one, he told the truth. He told him exactly what was going to happen, and it did. And then what happened? 2 years later, Pharaoh has this dream. Do you remember the dream? 2 dreams, actually.
7 that kind came out of the river, and then 7 lean.
Yep.
And lean ate it to that.
Right. There was seven cows, literally nice, fat, sleek cows, and then 7 gaunt ones that didn't seem anything like that in all of Egypt. And then the grains, the heads of grain. I don't remember which one came first.
The kind came first.
Yeah. And then same thing. You have the 7 good heads, and then the really shriveled up ones took over. And what was the interpretation?
7 years of prosperous, 7 years of famine.
7 years of prosperous in everything, and then 7 years of famine. And Joseph didn't just tell him the dream. He also said, here's what you ought to do. Yeah? You ought to get somebody in charge. And during those 7 years, you ought to gather up as much grain and everything as you can and store it away for those 7 years of famine. And that's exactly what happened. In fact, Pharaoh said, who's smart enough to do all of this? But let's make can you imagine Pharaoh picking a convict, and just because he interpreted his dream, he said, oh, well, let's make him second in charge of the whole country. He did, yeah. God was with him. God took care of all of that. And Joseph realized that. I really think he was probably a little cocky when he was a teenager and seeing those having those dreams, and the fact that his dad loved him more than his brothers and all of that stuff. And he probably was kind of a show off, but he learned. He became very, humble and all of that. And then the brothers came, they got grain. He sent them back, or let them go back, kept one. And then when they came back with Benjamin, his real brother, not half brother, but his real brother, they got ready to send him home, and he stuck his silver cup in Benjamin's sack. Why do you think he did that?
You know next week's or this week's, that question.
Is it? I thought I read that this morning
No, it's today.
or yesterday.
We wound up with Genesis today.
Yeah, we finished all of Genesis today. Is it not in yours?
We got to the point where
It
they
was
went
Wednesday.
home to get Genesis, Benjamin, and bring them back. And that's where we were just mistaken to stop.
So this is the 29th. Yeah, the 29th should have finished Genesis unless those things are wrong.
Exodus in the morning, tomorrow.
Yeah, we start Exodus tomorrow. So check your thing and make sure, because if it's wrong, then I need to find out why and print it.
Today is what?
The
On my
29th.
phone, it's day 28.
Well, it
Today is the 29th.
should be the 29th.
Mine says the 28th.
Well,
Yeah, mine doesn't finish
Well, I know
until
we
tomorrow.
finished before what you just said. We finished there.
well, hers is the same thing, so there's two different dates somehow.
Mine doesn't finish Genesis until tomorrow.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Well,
So, but,
We'll just read one ahead.
yeah, well,
That's
that'll work.
all I could do.
So, what happened? Why do you think he did that with the silver cup?
So you got them to bring,
Yeah, well, Benjamin was already there. This was when they were getting ready to leave, and he had them put his silver cup in Benjamin's pack, so that when they stopped, or when they were stopped, because he sent his men after them, Joseph did, and when they found it, they found the cup in.
That would put the most fear in them if they thought something was going to happen to Benjamin.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
And it was, in a sense, I think he was testing his brothers. Because, when it came down to between him and the brothers, they sold him into slavery, right? But this is, his other brother. And Judah was like, no, you can't. Here, I'll take his place. Why is that significant? What did Judah do earlier when Joseph was
We were the
sent?
one that put him in the cistern.
Well, they all put him in the cistern. Yeah, Reuben was planning on getting him back out. And while Reuben was gone somewhere, Judah was the one that saw the Ishmaelites and said, hey, let's sell him. We'll get some money out of this deal. We'll be, we won't lay our hand on him. And then we can take his coat, rip it up, put blood on it. So Judah was the one that kind of instigated all of that. And here it's just the opposite now. He's saying, let me stay. I'll be your slave, or I'll do whatever, and let him go back to his father. But I thought that was very significant that Judah had this big turnaround. And I think a lot of it happened because of what happened with Tamar. I think that really made an impact on him and humbled him a lot. And
Was that the second time the cup was involved in the sack of grain?
I don't know, could have been. I don't remember it being before, but
Seems like the brother.
now the money
The money
was back.
bags of money.
And the money was back both times. And I personally think that Joseph just paid for all of it out of his funds. But that's why their money was back. But I think the cup that he used for divination, which may or may not be true, we don't really know. Up until this point, I know she brought that out. The Bible had not specifically said, don't use divination. It does later. But that was in the Ten Commandments in that area. God will say that. But I don't think it was really looked upon favorably anyway. And I think, like I said, I'm not sure that he used it for that or if it was just a silver cup that he said that he used that for. And then, so Isaac, Jacob, before he dies, he blesses Ephraim and Manasseh, and he switches his hands. And Joseph tries to say, oh, no, that's wrong. And he says, no, I know what I'm doing. I'm taking the younger one. It's all right. And then he also has the blessing it's almost like a prophecy for each of his sons. And who was the oldest son?
His own son?
Reuben, yeah. Reuben was the oldest son. And he did not give him the right of firstborn because why?
Because he slept with his wife.
Slept with the concubine. Yeah. I don't remember now which one it was. Bilhah, I think. It wasn't. Yeah. Anyway, it was one of Jacob's wives that were given to him. It was one of the concubines of either Leah or Rachel. And so he said, okay, you're no longer firstborn. And then the next two in line were Simeon and Levi. And why did they not get firstborn rights?
Similar thing, wasn't
Yeah, but do you remember what they did? It had to do with their sister. They killed all the men of Shechem because the son, whose name was Shechem, basically raped their sister. And so they said, okay, we'll intermarry with you as long as you all are circumcised. And while the men were all in pain from all that, they went through and they killed all the men and carried off all their plunder. And so he said, because of their anger. And in fact, he says, you are going to be scattered throughout the other tribes. What happened to Levi, the tribe of Levi?
What happened to them? Did they not become the priests?
Right. Priests and the ones that worked, but did they get a what do you call it? Did they get land in the promised land? No, they didn't. They didn't get an inheritance in the promised land. They were scattered throughout the nation, which is exactly what Jacob said of him. And Simeon, they have an inheritance, but you'll find as we go through there that they end up basically kind of disappearing. And that's why Jacob takes Ephraim and Manasseh, and they become his sons, which made 13, but then it drops back down to 12. So we have 12. Okay? One of the things that she had, in the show notes, one thing it talked about the genealogies. And I like the fact, I read this little article, and one of the things it said the reason they have it's good to have the genealogies in there is it substantiates the Bible history from secular history. They can look back in secular history, they find these names, and by the Bible having those, it kind of is another showing that the Bible is true, that it's not an error. They confirm prophecy. It shows the detailed nature of God, which I like because I'm detailed nature too. And then within those list of genealogies, there's there's always something that you can learn about people, like the prayer of Jabez, or the fact that, yes, I just went blank on his name, was the one that, with Mighty Hunter. You know who I'm talking about? Seems like it starts with an N, but it's in the Nimrod, the Mighty Hunter. Yeah, you'll learn some things about people other than the main characters of the Bible. So, okay.
Well, in blessing them, he blessed Judah, and he said that the scepter shall not depart from Judah,
Right.
nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh comes.
Yep.
Promise.
There's a promise of Jesus that the scepter will. Yeah.
David's going to be the king. And
Yep. And that's another reason when we got to Saul, he was not from the tribe of Judah.
Right.
He was a Benjamite, so God never planned on him being king, or his making a dynasty. It was going to come through Judah, which is David. And another reason why, even after Solomon and 10 of the tribes were taken away from him, they still had a descendant of David on the throne in Judah. Right? Yep. I was going to go back to that and I forgot. All right, well, let's stand. Bob, you got a song you can lead us in? I put Mike on the spot last week or the week before.
No.
I think we did Jesus Loves Me.
That sounds like good.
All right.
I thought we had work to that one.
I hope. Yep. Whichever. And my mic is still on if you want to mute me.
Jesus loves me, this I know.